you ever discovered a detail at a theme park and thought, there's gotta be a story behind that? Well, you've come to the right place. We're Amanda, Kevin, and Kim, the team behind Where in the Park, and we've spent years exploring theme parks and creating seek and find games that uncover the details that most people miss. And now we're diving into the history, stories, and secrets behind those magical details. So grab your curiosity, and maybe even a churro, and let's explore the parks together, one detail at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Where in the Park podcast. This is Amanda, and last month we posted an episode where Kevin went over a detailed history of how the theme park we know as EPCOT, located at the Walt Disney World Resort in Florida, came to exist. He focused on why that park has a World Showcase section, and that episode was laying the groundwork for this series all about the pavilions of the countries found along the lagoon. If you missed it, we encourage you to go back and give it a listen. For those of you who have been to EPCOT, you know that when it comes to exploring the World Showcase, you have a choice to make. Which country to start in? We had some debate over where this series should begin as well, but in the end, we decided to follow the same path that we laid out in our Scan Before playing cards in our EPCOT Where in the Park games. Here at Where in the Park, we create unofficial seek and find games to play at theme parks, and each game includes a QR code that reads Scan Before Playing. If you scroll past the instructions, there's a section labeled Wanna Play Faster, where you can reveal the lands for each card in the pack. We typically list those lands clockwise through the park, and that's exactly what we'll be doing here, which of course means that our journey around the World Showcase begins in Mexico. Now, before we begin, this is going to be a really fun and educational episode, but it's going to be on the longer side than most. So if you want to skip ahead, we will include chapter marker timestamps in the show notes for you. But if you are ready to dive in, let's get started. Okay, so just as a refresher, shortly before his death, Walt Disney recorded a video announcing that the Florida project would be known as Disney World. And the main purpose of Disney World was EPCOT, an experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Over time, EPCOT, the city, transformed into EPCOT Center, the theme park, with World Showcase becoming one half of that vision. The Imagineers went through many iterations of what World Showcase would look like, from indoor shopping complexes to semicircular enclosed buildings, before arriving at the mostly outdoor pavilions inspired by the architecture of specific countries. And Mexico has been part of that conversation from the very beginning. At the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, Imagineers designed the Ford's Magic Skyway queue to wind past miniature architectural representations of 11 countries in what they called the International Gardens. One of those countries was Mexico, and instead of representing modern 1960s Mexico, they chose to depict ancient Mexico. Official guides from the fair mention an Aztec pyramid as part of that display. Photos of this display have been pretty hard to find, so if you have any photos of this or know where to find any, please share it with us on our free private Facebook group, Where in the Park Explorers. Also on display at the World's Fair, though not by Disney, guests encountered an Aztec calendar stone and an Olmec colossal head. Versions of each of these would eventually appear in the EPCOT Pavilion. Between 1966 and the official groundbreaking for EPCOT on October 1st, 1979, which at the time was the largest private construction site on the planet, countless layout proposals were drafted. In one proposal from just a year before construction would start, the first nation to the left was Morocco, followed by Costa Rica, Taiwan, and then 11 other pavilions before finally reaching Mexico 3/4 of the way around the lagoon, between France and Scandinavia. We have a map of what this World Showcase would have looked like over on the blog that accompanies this episode at whereinthepark.com/podcast. In 1978, they built a scale model of what the park might look like, this time positioning Mexico as the first country you would come across from the Future World section of the park, but it's the first country on the right. That model shows Mexico represented by a large Mesoamerican style pyramid with green plant life of some kind atop each tier. There is also a huge show building behind that pyramid with a large aqueduct that you would walk underneath to enter the World Showcase, running from the show building across the walkway and all the way to the lagoon. In researching this episode, we found a 2017 D23 article that shared some EPCOT concept art, including one of the Mexico Pavilion by artist Colin Campbell in 1979. This art reflects what is shown in the model from the year prior, complete with a similar-looking pyramid with the leafy green plants I mentioned earlier, but now with some flowers added. The pyramid is angled in a way that the show building behind it isn't visible, and large trees are at the center of the art, making it unclear where in the park this pavilion would be located. Also found in this concept art was a Cantina Mexicana outdoor bar, behind which is a domed roof, which could either be a restaurant or the domed roof found on the aqueduct in the model at the time. Along the water are acrobats performing Danza de los Voladores, which is an ancient Mesoamerican ceremony and ritual that is still performed today in Mexico and Central America, though we have not found any evidence that this was ever performed at EPCOT. At the base of the pyramid are guests on themed boats with their own gondolier on the back, floating alongside the main walkway and around a giant stone Olmec head. The boats have arches and ornamentations on them. One reads Veracruz, which is the state of Mexico where the first Spanish conquistadors landed, while the other reads Mexico, which is the state where the nation's capital of Mexico City is located. The general design of these boats, which weren't eventually used at EPCOT, were from the boats at the floating gardens at Xochimilco in Mexico City. This boat attraction was reflected a few years prior in Disney's annual report of 1975, which included concept art that they described as, quote, an excursion by boat to Lake Xochimilco. They mentioned that it was art created for, quote, a discussion with Mexico. Beginning in January 1976, Disney representatives met with Mexico's Secretary of Tourism and presented pavilion concepts to President Luis Echeverria and his family. They liked the idea, but knew that Disney was building Tokyo Disneyland in Japan and EPCOT at the same time. It was suggested that if Disney also built a theme park in Mexico City, they would sponsor the pavilion in EPCOT. While definitely something to consider, adding another park would stretch resources too thin. Ultimately, Mexico did not invest financially in EPCOT, but Disney moved forward anyway, believing that the country's presence was essential due to the close relationship, at least geographically, between the United States and Mexico. According to historian Randall Shepard's 2016 research in Latin American Research Review, Disney instead sought feedback from Mexican exchange students and the Mexican ambassador to the United States regarding early pavilion designs. The students didn't like the designs at all, explaining that the designers needed to actually experience Mexico to understand it. The lead designer of the Mexico Pavilion was Disney Imagineer X Atencio, who we will be covering in a future episode of Disneyland's Windows with a View series. Spoiler alert, his window is located above the Mad Hatter shop. Anyway, X responded to the students by hiring artist Eddie Martinez in 1976. Eddie was born in Los Angeles, California, and was of Mexican descent. After working with Disney on the mural at the Hall of Presidents at the Magic Kingdom and creating murals for Disneyland, he moved to East LA and started working extensively with the Goes Art Studio and Gallery, a center of Mexican-American muralism and cultural activism, alongside his friend and film layout artist Ray Aragon, who had also worked on projects for Walt Disney Studios. After a month-long tour around Mexico, Eddie returned to the studio and created a one-man art exhibit inspired by his travels. Some of his Disney colleagues attended the exhibit in support, including X Atencio, who knew immediately that Eddie was the right man for the job to work on the Mexico Pavilion. One fun fact about Eddie Martinez, though not Disney-related, in the 1990s, he would go on to become the architectural themed designer for the Forum Shops at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and designed the Festival Fountain Show there, which includes animatronics of Roman statues. While it definitely needs some maintenance today, which are his words from a few years ago, if you are in the area, still be sure to go over there and check out his work around Caesar's Palace. Anyway, Eddie was initially hired for the Mexico Pavilion to develop concept art for a ride-through attraction, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And in 1979, became the production designer overseeing illustrators, sculptors, model makers, and special effects teams working on the pavilion. His first request in his new role was to hire his friend, Ray Aragon. Ex Atencio agreed, as he was also friends with Ray, and in 1980, Ray became the costume designer and art director for the attraction. During this time, a young Imagineer and future Disney legend named Joe Rohde was just beginning his career at WED Enterprises. WED was renamed to Walt Disney Imagineering in 1986. Known most commonly today for leading the design of Animal Kingdom, his very first assignment was in 1980 to build detailed models and scenes for the Mexico Pavilion, discovering a talent in creating rockwork and ruined pyramids. In doing all this research, though, we were unable to find when it was officially decided to put Mexico as the first pavilion on the left from Future World, which is where it opened in 1982 and where we know it today. Again, the model from 1978 has it as the first pavilion on the right, and construction began the next year. We do know that the Disney company was frantically trying to get countries on board to sponsor their respective pavilions, and not all of them signed on. So there was a lot of pavilion shuffling around to get the configuration of what we know today. If you have any details about what led to these decisions, definitely let us know. Many sources state matter-of-factly that Mexico is the start on one side and Canada on the other because those are the two countries that touch our borders here in the United States. But we're not sure if that decision was really made or if that story was just made up after the park opened. And still, why is Mexico on the left and Canada on the right and not vice versa? So definitely let us know. Side note, the only pavilion on opening day that received country-backed government funding would be Morocco. The Mexico Pavilion would later find corporate sponsorship with Moctezuma Brewery, famous for the Sol and Dos Equis beer brands, and it has gone through a few mergers over the years, but is still a major brewery in Mexico, originally founded in 1890 and is now owned by Heineken as of 2010. Sponsorship would also come from the San Angel Inn, but more on them in a little bit. Now that we've learned more about how we got a Mexico Pavilion and some of those who worked on it, let's take a closer look at what we have here today. Before we start, though, we just want to mention that we highly recommend going to our blog at whereinthepark.com/podcast to see the side-by-side photos of the EPCOT Pavilion and the real-world inspirations when you get a chance. We'll do our best to describe them, but it's also great to see them. Also, historian Randall Shepard, whom we mentioned earlier, noted that the Imagineers were drawing on established American touristic images of Mexico, images shaped over decades through marketing campaigns that presented Mexico as both ancient and modern. So keep that in mind as we describe what's in the park. As you walk into the pavilion, on the left is Choza de Margarita, a small outdoor bar and snack location that specializes in margaritas and small bites that opened in November of 2017. The name simply means Margarita Hut, and that's exactly what it looks like, with log-shaped pillars holding up a thatched roof. The two cash registers have yellow stone carvings with art that appears to be a stylized image of a smiling man, though we're not really sure what that's based on. Running images through Google Lens comes back with it saying that these are modern versions of an archaeological artifact from Peru's Chavin culture named Remonde Stele. Directly across from Choza de Margarita is La Cantina de San Angel, which has been part of the pavilion since opening day in 1982. This outdoor quick service location is situated along the lagoon and serves tacos, margaritas, and other familiar favorites. In 2010, this area expanded to include La Hacienda de San Angel, adding an indoor casual dining table service experience to the pavilion with large windows looking out across the lagoon. This is a great option for those looking for dining with a view of the nighttime spectacular, which, as of this recording, is Luminous, the Symphony of Us. But only if you can get a table with a window view, as they don't offer a dining package at this location as of this recording. Between La Cantina and La Hacienda is a framed tiled art piece with 3 large square tiles with the words Arte, Alimento, and Amigos, or Art, Food, Friends in Spanish. These words are each framed by colorful tiles with patterns of reds, blues, yellows, and greens. There's also a fountain nearby with blue and yellow tiles. These either are or are based on Talavera tiles, which are named after a town in Spain, Talavera de la Reina. The art style was introduced to the city of Puebla in 1531, and that is now the exclusive home to authentic artisans of this style of art and where they live today. Just beyond the Hacienda de San Angel, you may hear live music from the Mariachi Cobre, a band that formed in Tucson, Arizona in 1971 and has been performing here since the park's opening. Across from these eateries is the main focal point of the pavilion, a large 36-foot tall pyramid with steps inviting you to go inside. But the large symbolic imagery found on the temple today is not a replica of a single Mesoamerican structure. Official Disney materials have described it as a composite of pre-Columbian architecture, leading towards Aztec styles, while they have also sometimes referred to it just being Mayan. The best official description, though, used to be on a wall inside the pyramid, which stated that it is, quote, inspired by the architecture of three major pre-Columbian civilizations, the Maya, Aztec, and Toltec. Starting with the main set of stairs at the front of the pyramid with its sleek sides, as well as having a temple on top, is similar to the Mayan pyramid El Castillo, also known as the Temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza, Yucatan. This is the temple that D23 and other sources point to as inspiration for the pyramid. The dimensions of the pyramid and that single temple on top, sitting proportionately with the rest of the pyramid and with its tapered roof comb, are likely more inspired by the Tikal Temples 1 and 2, also known as Temple of the Great Jaguar and the Temple of the Masks, respectively, which are the Mayan pyramids that are actually located in neighboring Guatemala, not Mexico. There's a show from National Geographic that shows an artist recreation of what those temples may have looked like. The show is called The Origins of the Maya Civilization, and we'll include a screenshot on our blog so you can compare. Some sources point out that the pyramid was also inspired by the Aztec pyramid, the Magician of Uxmal. But other than how it has stairs and a temple on top, we don't really see too many details here that appear in the park version. Looking closer at the pyramid, you'll notice serpent heads along the staircase, which are modeled after the Aztec Temple of the Feathered Serpent, or the Temple of Quetzalcoatl in Teotihuacan, Mexico. At the very top of the pyramid, you'll find a section of what looks like a window or an opening, and that's because it is. This area serves as a control booth for the lighting and pyrotechnics for the nighttime shows around the World Showcase Lagoon, as it has a great vantage point overlooking the showcase. Moving on to the bottom of the pyramid steps, which is at the top of the set of stairs for guests, is a large painted stone-carved work of art, which is actually repeated on the side of the pyramid as well. It was placed strategically at the bottom of the staircase as an attempt to prevent people from being tempted to climb the stairs. And people still have done it, but that might get you banned for life, so we don't recommend that you do that. Now, as for what that art represents, in referencing the extensive research by Harvard University, Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethology, and smarthistory.org, we think we've pieced together that the main person in the middle looks like King Bird Jaguar IV, who ruled from 752 to 768, and is considered to be the most prolific ruler of Tlaxchilan, located in Chiapas, Mexico, near the border of Guatemala. In this region, you'll find hundreds of sites with carved lintels, which refer to the beams above a doorway, above which where these carvings were discovered, as well as hieroglyphic writings and recordings of important events. For those doing additional research, Lintel 1, Structure 33 has the most resemblance to the one at the park. And don't worry, we have linked everything over on our blog for easy reference. Both the original lintel and the one back at EPCOT show the king holding a Kawil scepter, which embodies the divine legitimacy and justice of sacred rule under one supreme creator. He is facing what may be one of his wives, Lady Greatskull. However, our research also found another lintel, Lintel 26, Structure 25, 23 for those playing along at home, in which Lady Shook is giving a similar jaguar head-shaped helmet to her husband and Bird Jaguar IV's father, Lord Shield Jaguar II, who ruled Castilian for 60 years and again is the father of Bird Jaguar IV. And while Lady Shook is not Bird Jaguar's mother, it's a long story, it's full of drama, we're not going to get into it here, but there is some imagery to suggest that Lady Shook is passing the Jaguar helmet to her stepson, who is now the ruler. Now, this is entirely speculation. We could not find any concrete evidence to support who this lintel is portraying, and we could not find any close resemblance to the person on the right of this mural. So if you have any information at all, definitely let us know. Now, in looking past the pyramid structure, there are walls to the left and right just behind it. These are part of the rectangular show building that houses most of the Mexico Pavilion's indoor space. And each side has nearly identical art, so following the descriptions should match each side. Starting from the bottom, there is a stepped form with rectangular patterns on the walls to the left and right of the staircase, which are made up of two-headed snakes. A similar detail is found on the building of the Temple of the Nuns in Uxmal. Above that, running down the center of the wall section, is a set of 4 similar-looking square decorative faces with crooked noses. Faces like this are found at the Palace of the Nuns, sometimes called the Nunnery or La Iglesia, which is located just a short walk from El Castillo and Chichen Itza. To the left and right of those faces are squares that kind of look like a guy with his mouth wide open, with 2 white eyes, a pink nose, and a big round tongue. Similar looking art is found on the front of the Palace of the Masks, also known as Codspop in Cabá, Yucatan. This is an important Puuc site, and these are said to represent the eyes of Choc, the Mayan deity of rain, thunder, and lightning. Apparently, that big round tongue is actually an eyeball, and everything else is just his eyelids and ornamentation around the eye. And then at the very top of the walls, there are a few more Quetzalcoatl serpent heads. Now, before we enter the pyramid, we want to point out a section that's just up the walkway, a little past the pyramid's entrance. This is a meet and greet area where characters like Donald Duck might be, and more about him later. On the Walt Disney World website and app, this meet and greet is described as "Say hola to Donald Duck as you explore the base of an Aztec pyramid." Now, this pyramid is themed with Toltec warrior statue pillars very similar to those found at the Tula site at the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. Upon entering the pyramid, guests enter a space with some museum displays of artifacts from ancient Mexico. Over the years, the displays and the main focus of this room have changed. The formal name of this area is Mexican Folk Art Gallery. In the past, it's been home to a large Aztec calendar known as a sunstone, which was a carved stone circle roughly 12 feet in diameter. It had a neat use of projection mapping technology, with projectors making the stone appear painted, as stones like this may have looked in ancient times. The one that used to be in the park was a replica of a sunstone created in the early 1500s, the original of which is on display at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. Actually, we should point out that this museum also has a Tula warrior statue and a few of those lintels we mentioned earlier. There's also a piece of concept art for this pavilion that shows a large fountain in front of a temple that looks very similar to the El Paraguas fountain that was installed at the museum in 1964. They also had a book that was released in 1978 named Treasure of Ancient Mexico, which we're going to guess was in the Imagineering Library. And it was also likely that they made a few research trips to this museum while designing the pavilion. Today, as we are recording in 2026, you'll find an exhibit of Remember Me, La Celebración del Día de Muertos, or the celebration of the Day of the Dead. This was added in 2017 to correspond with the release of Disney Pixar movie Coco. Inside, you'll find both ancient artifacts and references from the movie. We covered this festive holiday in our October 31st, 2025 episode, Dia de los Muertos at Disney Parks, Tradition, Tribute, and Timeless Celebration. So we invite you to go back and give it a listen if you haven't done so already, because it was a good one. As you walk past this room, you'll walk under a carved wooden sign that reads Plaza de los Amigos. This area is designed to make it look like you're walking outdoors, but right around dusk, after the sun has just set, sometimes referred to as perpetual twilight. Immediately in front of you is a balustrade with stone pillars, which is similar to the concept art that had been created in 1975 to present to Mexico. Guests then chose to go left or right as they head into the marketplace that they can see in front of them. Night markets were and are popular in Mexico, but even more than that, due to the warmer climates, it's more common for family gatherings to take place at night in Mexico than in the United States. This plaza is a Spanish colonial-style town square inspired by the town of Taxcal, a historical silver mining town in the state of Guerrero. Here you'll find large fountains as well as colorful stalls for shopping, with Spanish colonial architecture used for the building facades on the left and right walls. A few sources online say that the name of the large fountain directly in front of the balustrade is named Fuente de la Vida, which means fountain of life, but we couldn't find anything officially confirming this. In the middle of the town square is a bustling marketplace of kiosks selling authentic items from Mexico, including jewelry, hats, pottery, clothes, and more, as they have since the park opened in 1982. The first building on the left that you can enter is a larger store named La Tienda Encantada, which translates to the Enchanted Shop. It is full of Disney-branded merchandise specifically made for the Mexico Pavilion, as well as Mexican art throughout the shop as decoration. The first building on the right is the home of La Cava de Tequila, which opened on August 28, 2009, in the former Arribas Brothers location, which is now located between El Tienda Encantada gift shop and the queue for the Lands boat ride. The Arribas Brothers store is named La Princesa de Cristal, which just means the Crystal Princess. Here you can also find a glass blower whose techniques originated in Puebla, Mexico in the 1500s. The Arribas brothers, who were two brothers named Tomás and Alfonso Arribas, actually started as glassblowers in La Coruña, Spain. They were discovered by Walt Disney at the 1964 New York World's Fair, where they were blowing glass at the request of the Spanish Cultural Ministry. By 1967, they had opened their first location in a Disney park with a small shop in Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland in Anaheim. They would eventually move to a shop in New Orleans Square and expand to a shop on Main Street. They would also open a location at the Magic Kingdom when it opened in 1971, and all of these locations are still operating today. They opened Artisans Mexicanas in the Mexico Pavilion on EPCOT Center's opening day and were one of the original corporate sponsors for the pavilion. As I mentioned, this location is now home to La Cava del Tequila, run by the Palmas Restaurant Group, which is the same company that runs 12 other Mexican food locations on Walt Disney World property, including the other dining locations I already mentioned outside the pyramid, plus the main restaurant for this pavilion, San Angel Inn. The restaurant is actually run by members of a family that have been operating a restaurant by the same name in Mexico City since 1963. The original San Angel Inn, which is still in business in Mexico, is located in a hacienda that is over 400 years old. It was built in the San Angel neighborhood in 1616 and became the Hotel San Angel Inn in 1907 when an American company bought the house and converted it. It was designated a national monument in 1937 and was eventually sold to the Debler family and their associates in 1963, where they still own and operate today as a restaurant and bar with indoor dining and outdoor patios. Anyway, there is an episode of the Disney Dish podcast from September 2024 where the host interviewed Ricky Debler Jr., whose grandfather owned San Angel Inn restaurant in 1963. Ricky tells the story of how the relationship between his father, Richard Debler Sr., and the Disney company started. Sharing that in the 1970s, a group of Disney employees, including theme park consultant Steve Baker, went to Mexico and learned that the San Angel Inn was an iconic destination within Mexico City. Ricky goes on to explain that his grandfather, his father's father, was the owner of the San Angel Inn and had received an invitation to join EPCOT Center. His grandfather, though, wasn't interested in leaving Mexico, so he threw the invitation away. Ricky said that his father, who had also started a restaurant of his own by that point, despite only being in his early 20s, found the golden Mickey envelope in the trash can and immediately realized the opportunity that they were being offered. He convinced his parents to let him and his friend Pedro move to Florida to run this restaurant at Disney, and Ricky moved with his new wife to create the Sang Angel Inn at EPCOT Center. Today, Richie DeBlar Sr. is still the CEO and president of the Palmas Restaurant Group, and his son Ricky is the vice president of business development. That interview on the Disney Dish goes into more detail about other restaurants at the Walt Disney World Resort run by the group and provides more information about La Cava del Tequila, the tequila bar found in the Plaza de los Amigos. We'll put a link to the Disney Dish interview on our blog for this episode, so check it out if you're interested in learning more about that. The San Angel Inn restaurant features a different menu than its sister restaurant. The one in Mexico City is more of an upscale restaurant with appetizers like sea bass empanadas, escargot, duck foie gras, and beef hooves tostada, with entrees like grilled quail, lobster thermidor, and beef tongue available in Veracruz style or with peanut sauce and chipotle. Meanwhile, the park version has more of a traditional Mexican menu with appetizers like queso fundido, chicken tostadas, and totopos, which are corn chips with sides of cheese and salsa, and entrees like pollo de las rajas, chicken enchiladas, and a mole osobuco. Both restaurants, though, do have an Aztec tortilla soup on the menu, as well as steak and fish served Veracruz style, so that's exciting. All of that said, what's important to remember is both the Sang Angel Inn in EPCOT and the one in Mexico City are owned by the same family, and both the staff and the chefs work at both locations as well. As far as the look of the restaurant, if you look around the EPCOT version inside the pyramid, you'll notice similar elements, though not exact replicas, of stucco walls, arched openings, lantern-style lighting, and a courtyard atmosphere. But instead of Mexico City traffic outside the gates, you're seated along a peaceful river, looking across the water at a glowing pyramid with an Olmec colossal head and a jungle landscape with a smoldering volcano in the distance. This diorama is 60 by 40 feet, and according to the Existencio biography that came out last November, it was painted by Disney artists at MGM Studios, because Disney didn't have a large enough facility to accommodate it otherwise. As for that pyramid and volcano, are they actually found in Mexico? Most references to the temple pyramid simply state that it is Mayan. The closest photos of Mayan temples that we've found to this one are also those Tikal temples in Guatemala that we referenced earlier, and it's very likely that this is also just a composite of multiple styles. There's a hieroglyphic stairway in the Copan Maya archaeological site in Honduras that is the only example of a staircase with multiple pieces of ornamentation running up the middle of the staircase that is similar to the design of this pyramid at EPCOT. That stairway also has some stonework at the base of the stairs similar to what we see here. Also, the Copan Maya site includes the Tikal temples in Guatemala, so if Imagineers didn't visit this site, they may have at least opened a book with photos of it. The volcano in the background is supposed to just represent volcanoes in general, which Mexico does have, with estimates between 40 and 48 active volcanoes throughout the country. Glancing at photos of Mexican volcanoes, we would guess that Pico de Orizaba was the main inspiration here, if there was one. The Olmec head is based on the similar stone carvings found in the states of Veracruz and Tabasco. This picturesque view is the opening scene for this pavilion's attraction, Grand Fiesta Tour starring the Three Caballeros. But this wasn't the first version of this ride. Before the Three Caballeros, there was El Rio de Tiempo, the River of Time, which opened with the park in 1982 and was actually the only ride in the entire World Showcase on opening day. The working name for this attraction was Las Tres Culturas de Mexico, and it was designed to be an indoor-outdoor attraction. This is likely the one found in the Colin Campbell's concept art I mentioned earlier. Not surprisingly, based on the name, Eddie Martinez took inspiration from the Plaza de las Tres Culturas, or the Three Cultures Plaza in Mexico City, in which pre-Columbian Mexico, colonial Mexico, and modern Mexico are represented in a central square. This symbolism would become the basis for the attraction, leading riders through these periods of Mexican history. After floating past the temple and jungle diorama, as well as the guests dining at Sang Angel Inn, similar to the experience of Pirates of the Caribbean and the Blue Bayou restaurant at Disneyland, riders made their way through ancient temples, floating past an animatronic priest, and encountered videos of dancers, who were the Esplendor Azteca dance group led by Florencio Yescas. These dancers were deeply connected to the Danza Azteca revival movement, happening in both Mexico and the American Southwest. Ray Aragon, whom I mentioned earlier, designed the set and costumes that were around the dancers in the show scenes. The ride then continued into colonial villages filled with mariachis and folkloric celebrations, while a recorded narrator provided historical context to cultures and traditions. Exitencio drew up the storyline and helped work on the script for the narrator. There was, and still is, a large show scene with doll-like characters, similar to those found at It's a Small World, who played instruments, danced, or swung at a piñata. These dolls were designed by Ray Aragon as well, but based on the style of Mary Blair and Alex and Mark Davis, who famously designed the look for It's a Small World. The third section focused on more modern resort destinations like Acapulco and beach scenes reminiscent of Tulum. The songs throughout the attraction were written by Exitencio and composed by Armando Corral, a consultant to the Disney legend Buddy Baker, who was the musical director and composer for all of EPCOT Center. One of these days, we need to do an entire episode on Buddy Baker, but if you've been to a Disney park, you've definitely heard his music. But I digress. Back to El Rio del Tiempo. The ride concluded with a fireworks display and a map of the area, including images of children in regional costumes and local handmade crafts. Guests would then exit the boat and head into the marketplace, where they would find similar handmade crafts for sale. In our research, we found a video of the full ride from 1998. We'll be sure to link it in the blog for this episode so you can check it out. The ride's about 7 minutes, which is 40% shorter than the original concepts for the attraction. The ride proved to be quite popular, with lines forming outside the building and down the main walkway in the pavilion. In the 2000s, attendance for El Rio del Tiempo declined, and the park as a whole was turning to more IP and character-driven entertainment. El Rio del Tiempo would close January 2nd, 2007, and then reopen just a few months later as the Grand Fiesta Tour starring the Three Caballeros on April 6th. The Three Caballeros are from the 1944 film of the same name, and if you've been on the attraction or seen the movie, you know that the three cartoon characters who make up the Caballeros are Jose Carioca, a Brazilian parrot, Panchito Pistoles, a Mexican charro rooster, and then there's Donald Duck. Of course, Donald Duck doesn't really need an introduction, so we'll give a quick history on the other two. The Three Caballeros film is a follow-up to Saludos Amigos, which came out in 1942. And the creation of both was led by a group of Disney artists and animators who were sent on a Latin American goodwill tour founded by the U.S. government. Saludos Amigos is a feature-length film with both live action and animated sequences. At exactly 34 minutes into the 42-minute-long movie is a segment that has its own intro sequence named Aquarela do Brasil, or Watercolor of Brazil. This segment is the first appearance of a character they introduce as Joe Carioca, voiced by Jose Oliveira. Oliveira was a native of Brazil who went by the pseudonym Zé Carioca, and the character is more commonly known as Jose Carioca, but is actually known as Zé Carioca in Brazil. The segment that introduces the character begins with an artist creating a painting that transforms a flower into Donald Duck, and then Jose is painted into the scene, and they have a brief conversation, and then antics ensue. The Three Caballeros came out in 1945, and it begins with a long credit sequence, as films of the era did, with a version of the Three Caballeros playing. That song, which is also heard on the ride, uses the melody Ay Jalisco no te rajes, a Mexican song composed for a movie by the same name in 1941. The music by Manuel Esperon, and the original lyrics by Ernesto Cortázar. The English lyrics in this movie were written by Ray Gilbert, who would soon after this film write the lyrics to the song Zippity Doo Dah. After the credits, Donald Duck receives a birthday gift from his friends in Latin America, with the first gift being a film projector. The movie then has a few animated shorts before Jose Carioca finally shows up a little over 22 minutes into the film. He then takes Donald to Bahia, where the film turns into a combination of live action and animation, with humans interacting with Donald and Jose, similar to how the scenes are designed on the boat ride in the park. It isn't until 41 minutes, or over halfway through the 1 hour and 10-minute long movie, that these two characters unwrap another gift. This one is labeled Mexico. An instrumental version of the Three Caballeros song plays, and this version is more upbeat than the one in the opening credits and is closer to the one heard on the ride today. We then meet Panchito about a minute later, where he gives the other two Mexican sombreros and announces that they are three gay caballeros, and then sings the Three Caballeros song in its entirety. He then goes on to tell a story about La Posada, a story about Mexican children in Mexico celebrating Christmas, which is illustrated by Mary Blair, whose styles we mentioned earlier as an inspiration for a scene in the original version of the attraction. Later in the film, Donald does go missing in Mexico, and many of the scenes in the attraction are pulled directly from moments in the film. As for the ride itself and how it compares with El Rio del Tiempo, it no longer features a narrator. The storyline for this updated attraction is that you are on your way to an upcoming concert starring the trio. You're introduced to Jose and Panchito, who realize Donald is missing. The three cultures from the original attraction are still present as well, featuring locations from ancient, colonial, and modern locations around Mexico as the search for Donald continues, using updated screens and projector technologies. In the same style as the original animation techniques from the film by Ward Kimball and Fred Moore, new animation was done for the attraction by legendary Disney animator Eric Goldberg, perhaps best known for his animation of the genie from Aladdin. Much of El Rio del Tiempo's original set pieces were used for the Grand Fiesta Tour, including the large mural, temple, and volcano at the beginning. The major changes were the updated screens with the new film of characters at different locations and the finale scene of the stage in which Donald, Jose, and Panchito form their famous song. These characters were originally represented with cartoons projected on a screen behind a stage. The animatronics for these characters we know today were originally in the Mickey Mouse review at the Magic Kingdom from 1971 to 1980, then at the one in Tokyo Disneyland from 1983 to 2009, before finally being installed at the Grand Fiesta Tour in December of 2015. Both versions of the ride end with a simulated fireworks exploding with a light show on the ceiling, which works out well because that show is how the Three Caballeros movie also ends, with a fireworks display. And, well, that's everything we could find going around the Mexico Pavilion. If there's anything we missed, please join our free private Facebook group. Again, that is Where in the Park Explorers, and share with us because we always love learning more. And we hope you've discovered something new about this area and will go explore with renewed wonder and appreciation the next time you visit. If you'd like to see the concept art, early models, and side-by-side comparisons of the real-world structures that inspired this pavilion, including photos of the real Sang Angkal Inn in Mexico City, head on over to the blog that accompanies this episode at whereinthepark.com/podcast. We've included the images, maps, references, and more so you can explore even deeper. And if you are enjoying this new series as we walk clockwise around the World Showcase, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Next month, we'll be learning more about the Norway Pavilion, and until then, we will continue to dive deeper into details at other parks around the U.S. If there's a particular detail you've noticed and want us to do an episode about, send us a DM at Where in the Park or reach out on this podcast private Facebook group, again, Where in the Park Explorers. That is also where you can share your own photos and stories or just share with us what you learned in today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, we'll see you somewhere in the park. Bye for now. Thanks for exploring with us today. If you're ready to take your park experience to the next level, check out Where in the Park Games. They're self-paced, seek-and-find adventures designed for you to experience the park in a whole new way. Whether you're visiting for a birthday, a family gathering, date night, or even a solo trip, you'll be searching up high and down low for the details found in the park's theming. Get ready to discover a deeper appreciation for your favorite theme park with a Where in the Park game and take 10% off your next adventure by using code PODCAST10. Which park will you explore next? Until then, we'll see you somewhere in the park.